this meeting because Chair Voss is not able to join us this morning. We also have a new clerk. Her name is Francesca, and she is joining us today. Welcome, Francesca. If you're there and can confirm that we have a quorum, that would be great.
Good morning, Vice Chair. Yes, we do have a quorum.
Okay, thank you very much. So before we jump into the meat of our agenda, I would just like to recognize that today marks the 19th anniversary of 9/11, which was the 4 coordinated terrorist attacks that reshaped this nation and killed 2,996 people in New York City, Washington, D.C., and Pennsylvania on September 11, 2001. It's a somber reminder of how quickly life can change. And in honor of those who died, and for those who are still grieving their loss, I'd like to take a moment of silence before we move on. Okay, so let's get started with our meeting minutes. May I have a motion? If anybody would be interested in making a motion.
So moved.
Minutes.
This is Mayor Wells.
Second, Rebecca Jones.
Okay, could the clerk please call the roll or the vote?
Yes, thank you, Vice Chair Blakespear. From the City of San Diego, Georgette Gomez.
Yes.
From County of San Diego, Jim Desmond.
Yes.
From East County, Bill Wells.
Yes.
North County Coastal, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
For North County Inland, Rebecca Jones.
Yes.
And for South County, I didn't see Mary Follis when I entered. Are they absent? All right, I'm going to mark them as absent. Oh, I apologize. We're having some technical difficulties at the moment. Mary Follis?
Yes, aye.
Thank you so much. And that passes unanimously.
Okay, great.
Okay, let me see that. Ms. Voss?
So Hassan does not have a report for today. So we will go straight to item number 4, which is a review of draft board agendas. Is Victoria there and can speak to this?
Good morning.
I'm so sorry.
Excuse me, I'm sorry to interrupt. Did we have time for board member? I had a question.
Oh.
Yes, we do actually need to take public comments as well before we move on.
Oh, I'm so sorry. You're right. Okay, let's go to public comments and then we'll go to member comments. I apologize for skipping that item. That was inadvertent.
Thank you. And for the record, I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay, so that means there are no public comments. So that we'll
None
go
that I
now.
see. Thank
So now we'll go to member comments and I'll call on Mayor Jones.
Thank you. I just had a couple of questions. I was wondering if we could get an update. I know that with our sales tax down and all of that, I'm hoping that we can get an update as to where we are financially with our current projects that are in our transportation plan that we have in queue. Can we get that? And I know we can't do it today. I'm just hoping we can get that in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, Mayor Jones, that will come to the board in the next couple of weeks, an update on actually it's time to update the budget because when we adopted the budget, we said we're gonna do it quarterly. So it's time now to come with the first quarter adjustment, if any.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So scrolling down this list of 59 participants, I don't see any hands raised. So I think that means we have exhausted member comments. And just to confirm with the clerk, there are no public comments.
I see no public comments at this time. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So now we will go to Victoria for a review of draft board agendas.
Good morning. For the September 25th Board of Directors meeting, we have item number 1, which is public comments, followed by Policy Advisory Committee's chair report. Item number 3 is your standing executive director's report. Under the consent calendar, I have approval of the meeting minutes, followed by item number 5, which is the Policy Advisory Committee actions. Item number 6 is the proposed FY21 program budget amendment for the Old Town Center. This is coming from the Transportation Committee, and we're looking for an approve. Item number 7 is the 2018 RTIP amendment. We're looking for an adopt, and this is also coming from the Transportation Committee. Item number 8 is the SB1 State of Good Repair North County Transit District project list. Item number 9 is the FTA Section 5311 program of project for the CARES Act. We're looking for approve. Item number 10 is the FY20 FTA claims for the State of Good Repair program for NCPD. We're looking for the board to adopt this. Item number 11 is the Executive Director Delegated Actions. Item number 12 is the meeting and events attended on behalf of SANDAG, followed by your standing item number 13, which is the quarterly finance report and the annual rate swap evaluation. Item number 14 is the quarterly progress report on transportation projects. Under chair's report, we have one item, which is the iCommute Diamond Award employer recognition. And then under report, we have one right now, which is the proposed management agreement for the Rancho Lilac mitigation property. However, there are several items, including this one, that are in flux related to timing. So we'll work with the chair to properly agendize these at this meeting or a future meeting in coordination with the chair. We'd also like to add one item to the closed session to this agenda related to San Diego River Bridge. This concludes the September 25th draft agenda.
Okay, thank you. Any questions about that? I don't see any hands raised. So thank you very much, Victoria. We will now go to, I'm going to use the chair's discretion to hear item 6 first, and then we'll go back to item 5. This is about litigation. I want to make sure we have enough time to get to this
Vice
item.
Chair Blakespear, I'm so sorry. We do need to, for the record, there are no hands raised for public comment, but we do need to acknowledge that and also vote on approving the draft agenda.
Okay. So I would entertain a motion on the draft agenda.
This is Georgette Gomez. I'll go ahead and make the motion to move it forward.
I'll second it, Desmond.
Thank you, and I'll take the roll call vote. Just a moment, apologize. From the City of San Diego, Council President Gomez.
Yes.
From the County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
Yes.
From, excuse me, East County, Mayor Wells.
Yes.
From North County Coastal, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
North County Inland, Mayor Jones.
Yes.
And for South County, Mayor Salas.
Yes.
Thank you. That item passes unanimously.
Okay, thank you. So we're going to go now to item number 6, which is related to litigation, potential litigation. So I'm going to ask Seth Lichney if he could please address this item.
Thank you, Mayor, and good morning, committee members. The item before you today is a request to transfer $100,000 from the SANDAG Contingency Reserve Fund to the Regional Plan Implementation Work Program to be used to cover the initial costs of outside counsel and staff time to respond to potential legal action related to the Regional Housing Needs Assessment. As of today, staff has not received notice of legal action being taken against SANDAG, and we are currently unaware of what specific issues may be raised. The requested budget amendment would allow SANDAG to respond to any legal action in a timely manner with the assistance of outside counsel. To date, staff has received and partially responded to a Public Records Act request from a law firm requesting records related to the RENA process and public hearings. Once the budget amendment has been approved, staff will transfer the funds and take any steps necessary to prepare and respond to legal action taken against Sandag. If a lawsuit is not filed, Sandag staff will return to the executive committee to return the funds to the contingency reserve. Additionally, staff will return to the committee if additional funds are needed. That concludes my report. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Do we have any questions about this report from board members? I see Councilmember Zito, his hand is raised. Yes?
Yeah, thank you, Vice Chair. Seth, it sounds like you said you aren't aware or aren't ruminating on what the possible legal action is.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know. Vice Chair, are we taking comments at this point, or are you just looking for questions?
I think we should do questions and then hear from the public and then take comments.
Sounds good. So that was my one question. Thanks.
Okay. So seeing no other hands from board members, do we have any public comments on this?
No, Vice Chair Blakespear, I don't see any hands raised at this time.
Okay. Councilmember Zito, would you like to make comments? Oh, we can't hear you.
How's that?
Better.
I was just saying, yeah, there isn't much available, and I appreciate the chance to make a few comments, but I do note that there was some information published in the Coronado Times and some comments made by the Coronado City Manager. And at least based upon those comments, it seems like there's a chance that this litigation will be based upon there will be some element based upon the use of the weighted vote and in a quasi-judicial process. And my comment is I think it's a little bit premature to allocate funds for this. I think it's interesting to note that, were that to be the basis of any complaint, the complaint would be, we'd be asked to allocate funds to defend a complaint that was on a process that was not supported by the majority of the board and against the use of that process that was not supported by the majority of the board. And to be perfectly honest, I don't think that we should spend money defending that. And if the state were to want to help us out, maybe that would be the way to go and get some funds. And I realize the state's not going to give us any money, but just wanted to point out that, the process itself was not supported by the majority of the board, and the result was not supported by the majority of the board. And thus, I think the majority of the board would be maybe questionable as to whether or not they actually wanted to spend board fund or Sandag funds to defend such an action. And I'm only ruminating at this point until we see the lawsuits, and maybe it's a more salient point to wait to allocate the funds until the lawsuit is, if and when it actually shows up. Thanks.
Okay, any other comments from board members?
Yes, Supervisor Desmond here. I think this is premature. We don't even have a lawsuit here right now. And I know it's only transferring funds, but if one hasn't really been filed yet, what are we doing here? And I agree with Mr. Zito. This is 14 out of 19 jurisdictions voted against this action. And now we all seem to have to pony up via reserves to defend it. I'm not going to be supporting this action today.
Okay, could I ask the attorney to address the issue of the timing?
Of course. As most of you know, having dealt with litigation, in the event that an action is filed, then we would need to respond. Probably the longest time frame to be able to respond would be 30 days. And that's having something on file with the court in 30 days. Of course, that's going to take some time to prepare. And that's assuming that there's not any kind of a request for a preliminary injunction against either moving forward with the RENA process and imposition of that, or to the extent that this does relate to the voting process, to prevent further use of the voting process. And so those are the types of things that really could require a response within a matter of days. Because of that, it's my legal advice to you that we need to be ready. We have been in the procurement process to make sure that we have legal counsel available in the event that a lawsuit is filed, recognizing that once it's filed, we need to move very quickly. And to the extent that a lawsuit was filed and then we needed to come back to the next executive committee to have an action like this approved and then wait for that to be ratified by the board, that would probably work to our legal detriment in being able to timely respond to a lawsuit.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else on the board like to make comments?
Rebecca Jones. This is taxpayer money, and whether it's a contingency or not, I'm concerned about the litigation. I'm concerned about 14 of our 19 jurisdictions being having our voices silenced. So I for one, I feel like it's not defensible. However, I would like to see it play out and see where it ends up going. I'm not comfortable at this time moving forward with allocating that $100,000.
Mayor Blakespear, this is Bridget Gomez. I'll go ahead and make the motion to allocate the resources.
I will second the motion.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. So could the clerk please call the vote?
Thank you. From the City of San Diego, Council President Gomez.
Yes.
Thank you. From the County of San Diego, Supervisor Desmond.
No.
From East County, Mayor Wells.
No.
For North County Coastal, Vice Chair Blakespear.
Yes.
North County Inland, Mayor Jones.
No.
And from South County, Mayor Salas.
Yes.
And that motion does not pass.
Okay, could I ask the attorney to weigh in on, is the weighted vote relevant at the executive committee?
No, it is not.
Okay. So it just,
Ultimately, this matter would be subject to ratification at the board of directors, and to the extent that that happens, it would be relevant there.
okay. Okay, thank you.
So, Mayor Jones, I have a question then. Since it failed here at the executive committee, then will it not be heard at the regular board meeting?
The matter can be heard at the board of directors meeting. Because there is not an affirmative vote here, you don't have an affirmative vote to ratify, so whether it was a ratification or basically a revisiting your vote here would probably come to the board as just as a direct action to the board.
Okay, so we will hear it in the future at the next board meeting.
You should hear it at the next board meeting, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And so would the recommendation be not approval as part of the staff report? Is that the result of that vote?
The result of the vote would reflect that you did not approve it. And so effectively there is no action that has been taken here today. So I believe that it would come to the board not as a ratification of a negative vote, but instead it would come to the board as an original consideration for the board.
Okay. Okay, thank you. Any other questions from board members about this? Okay, I don't see any. So we will move to item number, we already called for questions or comments from the public. There were none. Okay, so now we're on to the next item, which is campaign contributions, item number 5, and I'll call on Supervisor Desmond.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. And I noticed the title here is the Executive Committee is asked to discuss and consider the development of board policy regarding campaign contributions. And it says by our SANDAG Executive Director. Actually, I'd like to make this discussion more about, not so much about the Executive Director, but any direct hire, which would basically just be the auditor and the Executive Director, and a potential policy regarding campaign contributions. We had one of our employees contribute funds to campaigns. So a sitting board member, our executive director, gave $4,200 to Georgette Gomez, and also gave $850 to a candidate running against a sitting board member, Kristen Gaspar's opponent. And I agree, this is a legal act. It's a legal act that both our executive director and auditor can do. However, as we've learned in ethics training that we've all had to take, that doing what's legal is not always right. And public perception always plays a part in the decision-making process. And supporting candidates of, or campaigns of board members who agree with you, and supporting opponents of board members who don't agree with you, gives a perception of manipulating the board and thereby putting the integrity of Sandag itself in jeopardy. As a government agency, we're spending taxpayer dollars and our integrity means everything. I agree, it's legal and it's our First Amendment right. However, I do think it's unethical to take positions on board member races that can directly benefit someone's salary who directly works for those people. So, it also could be perceived that an employee of the board is trying to buy votes for either a vision, a transportation plan, or an audit. Rather than bringing it forward on its merits, it looks like votes are being bought. So, and it's divisive for Sandag as well. That the action of someone looking to should be bringing the region together, bringing us together behind a plan. It should be the main objective of our employees, as opposed to dividing us up or picking favorites. If this was a city manager, a chief administrative officer had contributed campaigns, against a sitting mayor or council members or even a supervisor, it could be grounds for termination. I think this is a pattern of poor judgment. The committee recently created a policy to lessen our executive director's antagonistic approach to board members, and contributing the maximum to a campaign against a sitting board member, to me, is an antagonism. So realizing this is a legal thing, as far as giving campaign contributions, I think I'd like to see, or have the discussion at least, that the board come out with a policy that strongly recommends that no one hired by the Sandag Board of Directors should participate, either pro or con, in a Sandag board member's political campaign. So I'll leave it at that. It's the integrity of the institution I'm trying to protect, not trying to take away anyone's rights, but to protect the integrity of this institution, Sandag, which is woefully needed in times like these. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Sturgis.
Yes.
Since my name has been brought to this discussion, and yes, our executive director did contribute to my campaign, but I want to make it absolutely clear that my vote is never bought. It does not matter who contributes to my campaign. That's not how I operate as a public elected. So I just want to make that pretty clear and very specific to the record. I do not support this request. I think that we are definitely going into walking into the protection that people have as individuals. I think if we do not agree in how people give money, that's a different opinion. But I believe Supervisor Desmond also forgot to mention that Hassan, our executive director, also contributed to our current chair of Sandag as well. I don't agree with everything that Hassan does, and it does not mean that I'm being bought to support anything. So I just feel that the rationale for this request makes absolutely no sense. And the fact that people are allowed to donate to different candidates, that's people's rights. And I just don't think that we should be even spending a second discussing this. I think people are professional. We should act in such a way. And I'm in fact very offended right now.
Vice Chair Blake Sphere, I'd like to ask some questions or make some. First of all, I would like more information, more concrete information from Supervisor Desmond. I know whenever we're considering something on the city council to make a matter of policy, I want to see that potential policy, a draft of it, put before me. I also would like to see it vetted out for the constitutionality by the city, well, not in this case, by our council here at Sandag, before any action is taken on this matter. So then again, I'm requesting of Supervisor Desmond, if this is a direction that you want to go into, I think you have to give us something in writing that has been vetted out by our council.
Well, I'd like to ask our council to comment on this.
Thank you. There's a few different things that are in play here. One, in terms of imposing a policy like this and applying it to the executive director. The first thing that we'd look at is what are our current internal policies? Internal policies, generally our administrative policies are in the employee handbook, and these apply to all Sandag employees and to the executive director to the extent they don't conflict with what's in the executive director's employment contract. And there we really look at two primary things, and these are in section 4.25 of the employee handbook. First of all, policy statements regarding Sandag must originate from the board, and no member of the staff of Sandag in their role as a Sandag employee shall engage in political debate or become involved in political issues that are in conflict with the board's stated policy. So those, because that's not a matter directly currently addressed in the executive director's employment contract, that does carry forward. Looking at the executive director contract in its current form, there is a mandate to act in the best interest of Sandag at all times and to not engage in outside work that creates an actual or potential conflict of interest. So again, it's not directly related there. Looking forward at modifying either the employee handbook or that contract, this issue has been looked at, and the California Supreme Court has opined on it in a case Bagley versus Washington Township Hospital District. And there's a rule that's very relevant here, and that's that a government agency that would require a waiver of constitutional rights as a condition of public employment must demonstrate that the political restraints rationally relate to the enhancement of the public service, that the benefits that the public gains by the restraints outweigh the resulting impairment of those constitutional rights, and that there are no alternatives that are less subversive of the constitutional rights that are available. So ultimately, this is a court really looking at imposing this even on a overall as a strict scrutiny basis. And this would apply whether it is in the employee handbook or even whether it is in a contract. Courts have recognized that individuals can contract away their constitutional rights, but at the same time they say so long as it is not in contravention of law, regulation, or strong public policy. There is a California Labor Code on point here, California Labor Code 1101, that states that no employer shall make, adopt, or enforce any rule, regulation, or policy forbidding or preventing employees from engaging or participating in politics or controlling or directing or tending to control or direct the political activities or affiliations of employees. So again, this is something that a court would look at. If you had a condition in a contract that forbid this kind of activity, then this would be a basis for that strict scrutiny. And you really have to make sure that you are not overreaching. As worded, it does sound as if it's content neutral, so you'd have to say, is it as narrowly drawn as possible, and is the objective of it a matter of important public concern? Now there are, when we look also outside, we can look at ethics regulations, but ethics regulations generally related to campaign contributions generally emphasize disclosure rather than disqualification. And so again, this is something looking at, is there any way to, any less restrictive way to achieve this end, and you can look at those regulations as when such a campaign contribution is made, it is disclosed and there is transparency there. So in the end, if there was a prohibition, a blanket prohibition in the employee handbook applicable to all employees, I believe would run afoul of Labor Code 1101. But if it was anywhere as applied to the executive director, it would need to be in the executive director's contract, something that is agreed to by both parties. And to the extent that is there, then, if it was challenged, it would be subject to that strict scrutiny, that three-part analysis as reflected by the Supreme Court in the Bagley case.
Well, I'd like to ask John a couple of questions if I could.
Sure.
I'm not asking for a strict restriction or a prohibition of the contribution. I'm just and I'm just curious: would the word strongly recommend, getting involved in campaigns of sitting board members? Would that be too strong of language, or I guess imply that we're taking away anyone's rights?
Certainly, there's a sliding scale there when you move from you are absolutely prohibited to it's the board's desire. I think the further back just expressing a board's desire, that would be more defensible. But I also have to point out there's another accompanying labor code, Labor Code 1102, that talks about no employer shall coerce or attempt to coerce or influence his employees by or through means of a discharge or loss of employment to adopt or follow or refrain from adopt or following any particular course or line of political action or political activity. So to the extent that you are then looking to take action against an executive director because of their political activity, it would be difficult to enforce that and would likely run afoul of Labor Code Section 1102. But ultimately, the further you are to just expressing what's important to the board as opposed to mandating particular action or the avoidance of particular actions by an executive director, it would be more defensible.
I guess if there was a desire, but there was no real action, taken against it, sounds like the word desire, that it would be the board's desire that the executive director not, or the auditor, is really, I'm trying to make this point for whoever is directly hired by the board. So in this case, it's the auditor and the director. It would be the board, but I guess it would have to be in their individual contracts. So I get that. Thank you. Mary, thank you also. You're right. I should have come with it written. But really, I just wanted to have this conversation or discussion to see if the executive committee was interested in moving forward with this action or even making the recommendation that we potentially either put it in Mr. Crowder's and Mary Kay's contracts. That is our desire. Because quite frankly, the whole issue is I'm not trying to take away anybody's constitutional rights at all. But I do think it has detrimental effects on the institution of SANDAG when these types of actions take place. And to Georgette, I think it was Mrs. Ekrada that gave to our chair's campaign, not Hassan. But so anyway, I'm trying to protect the integrity of SANDAG for the long term. I want my kids and grandkids and whatever else to have, this opportunity for this entity to be surviving and successful. I think it's important that we all work together. But actions like this really kind of tear at the foundation of SANDAG, working together. But when we've got our employees picking winners and losers through their campaign efforts, I think that would be a desire of the board not to have those types of actions brought forward.
Okay, thank you.
I have a couple of questions. Sorry, I'm jumping in. So first of all, SANDAG is in the process of trying to figure out how we can build trust with the community. But I have a couple of questions directly, probably for Mr. Kirk. And that is, first of all, there was reference of the employee handbook. And I'm not clear, is all of our employees, including our director and our outside auditor, are they following the employee handbook?
Apologize. I've reviewed the executive director's contract. I don't have the other contracts in front of me, but I can tell you that the executive director's contract speaks to following the employee handbook in that there's a particular section in the employee handbook that is called out that he will follow, but then it says that he will follow the balance of the employee handbook to the extent that it does not conflict with his employment contract. If it does, and the employment contract takes precedence, if the employment contract is silent on those matters, then the executive director does follow it per his contract.
Okay, and just so I'm clear, who approved the employee handbook? Was it the board? Did the board approve the employee handbook? Because I don't recall ever seeing that.
No, the employee handbook has been before you. Some years ago, it was changed from administrative rules and regulations to the employee handbook, and that action was brought before you, I think maybe in the context of updating board policies, and that action was approved by you. But the substance of the employee handbook, I don't believe, even prior to consolidation, has been approved by the board.
Okay, I just feel like if our employees, whether our outside auditor and our executive director, if they're following a handbook, I would think that we would need to approve that. I don't think it would be approved by staff. So we may want to talk about that a little bit later, but I'll move on. So I probably disagree with Supervisor Desmond, and I'm not quite sure what he's saying as far as political activity. I personally think that whatever political activity someone wants to have outside of their bosses, essentially. So I think the appearance of a conflict would be if you are politicking for someone that you work for or someone against someone that you work for. I think that's where, and maybe that's what he was getting at. I'm not entirely sure. I would say that if there's a way to have some sort of policy that is just, not necessarily prohibited, but discouraged against specifically not political activity, but against political activity of board member of, politicking for or supporting financially or against board members. I think that is where I have an issue. And Council President Gomez had said that her vote can't be bought. I appreciate that. In San Marcos, our campaign contribution limits are $250, and I even $1 million couldn't buy my vote, but definitely $250. I still think it would look bad if our director had donated $250 to my campaign as well, even though it wouldn't buy my vote, obviously. But anyway, I think we just need to have a conversation personally as far as having the discussion of what we think is right and what we're comfortable with, because, we've talked about this many times. We want our staff and our board to be unified as one. And I don't think we can do that when there are certain things that are happening that maybe they're not illegal, but they seem inappropriate. Because back to what Supervisor Desmond had said a little bit earlier, and I can tell you, if my city manager who works directly for me was out contributing to someone that was running against me or even for me, contributing to my campaign, I'd have a problem with that. So I think just the appearance of and having a discussion would be warranted. And I would, again, to what Mayor Salas had said, I would like to see some verbiage. So maybe we bring this back at the next executive meeting and have a discussion at that point in time. I'm okay with moving it forward to the board, but I think it would be helpful to have some sort of draft verbiage so that we could know what we are discussing and have, some ideas and, some legal counsel from our our legal folks too in our city. So anyway, would like to know more about that employee handbook, and then also, you know, okay with moving it forward. So anyway, there.
Vice Chair Blakespear, I have another comment to make too. I think that, you know, we have the discussion of the executive director or other employees of Sandag making contributions to candidates, but I think that the bigger problem, I haven't seen it on Sandag, but I think that a bigger problem would be for a board member to solicit campaign contributions from any employee of an organization that we have oversight of. I think that's a bigger problem than what we're discussing today. So I think that, you know, if you're going to talk about policies, that there should be something directed to giving direction to board members as well. And I don't know whether it's covered under ethics or not, but I think that bigger problem is that somebody that has that kind of oversight over an organization to be soliciting donations from an employee.
Well,
If I may,
Okay.
Mayor, that what you're talking about is directly prohibited by Government Code Section 3205, so that is already covered.
Okay, so that's covered in any organization then?
Any public organization, any public agency.
All right,
right.
thanks.
Madam Chair, if
Thank-
I could. Madam Chair, I
Yeah,
appreciate-
I'd like to weigh in first though, and just offer
Okay.
some comments, and then, yeah, to me, this is it's really unfortunate that we're having to deal with this because we have a lot of big problems that we're dealing with at Sandag on multiple levels, and so I regret that we're in this situation, and I think that there's no question in my mind that this has a detrimental effect on the institution. So I and my city and at the different boards that I'm on, the executive director makes a strong effort to be nonpartisan and even not involved in politics at any level. I think we can't require that, obviously, but I think it's also important when you start looking at these transactions, all of them are different and all of them can be problematic. But like, for example, if our executive director was marching in a Trump parade on a Saturday and donating to Trump's campaign and wearing shirts and hats, and I mean, I would also find that objectionable and feel that there was an over politicization that was being introduced into an agency that has a job to do, and that we don't need to have that kind of thing. And I would, although I couldn't prohibit it, I would prefer that decision-making is run for that not to happen. I also think it's important to note that Georgette is running for Congress. So him contributing to her campaign is a different situation than contributing to somebody who's on or running against somebody who's on the board. And they're all implicated together in this general combination of political actions from these high profile executive director type positions, which our executive director is in. It sounded to me from hearing from our attorney that some of this is actually already somewhat covered. Like, for example, he said in the contract, I think this is what you said, that there's language that says that he must refrain from actual or potential conflicts of interest. So in some ways, it's an interpretation of what that means. And maybe, I mean, maybe having this conversation publicly is enough to create a culture where where it's clear what kind of expectation that we have, and that we don't need to have a policy that, I mean, I would find it unusual if either the auditor or the executive director would agree to give up their First Amendment right to contribute in their contract. It seems like in some ways these are norms that are unspoken that other executive directors and people who have high profile positions in agencies like this follow, so that we don't get into problems like this, especially when we have a board that is highly divided politically and just, it's an environment right now that's very partisan. So we are trying to do our job and accomplish the goals that Sandag has as a transportation agency. And to me, this seems like it's very much a big distraction, but it furthers this notion that we're a really divided agency. And I am hopeful that all of our actions are going toward trying to rectify that. So I'm not sure exactly if I would support moving forward with a policy change or something that's specific, or if, I mean, maybe if there is a desire for that from this, for like, what is the action that comes out of this? I mean, maybe it would be a combination of like a subcommittee of Desmond and Salas working together or something like that to come up with something that you might be able to suggest, or I'm not exactly sure, or if we just have a conversation about this again in the future. But I just wanted to offer those comments as the things that I'm thinking about. And Supervisor Desmond, I know you wanted to speak again.
Well, thanks. And I know some other people haven't weighed in if they like. I'm just happy having the conversation because I think we all agree this is not in the best interest of Sandag, having these type of actions. Even though they're legal, the public perception, still plays a role here. So I'm happy having the conversation today. I'm not going to make a motion. Kind of think about it and what to do with it. But you're right, a lot of other things are happening, but the integrity of Sandag is crucial. If we're ever going to go out to the public with our hands out again, and our hands are dirty, it's not going to happen. So I'll just leave it at that. I appreciate the conversation. Actually, very civil. Thank you. It was. I appreciate we all. Everybody had great ideas, and all I really want to do is have this kind of vet it out. Thank you.
Chairman, this is Bill Wells. Can I say something?
Sure.
Another opportunity for press.
Okay, go ahead, Mayor Wells.
Yeah, Supervisor Desmond, my thought on this is it's the First Amendment issue is always going to be problematic because the court has said that it's speech to give money to candidates. So you're never going to be able to get around that. But I have a suggestion that might have as much effect without getting Sandag really in the middle of it. And that is, I suggest that I'm going to go back to my city council and pass a resolution that we're going to send a letter to Sandag and to the people involved and asking them to not further divide this board by getting involved in this kind of behavior. That way he'll know how we feel as a city, and it's not going to be binding because we don't have any influence on the policies of Sandag, but we can get the point across. And one thing I do want to say is that I do think the board is divided. I think it's probably the most divided political body I've ever been involved in, and so this should be dealt with.
Okay. Okay, great. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Mayor Wells. Were you finished?
No, I'm finished. Yeah, thanks.
Oh, okay. Okay, great. Okay, good. Well, we've talked about that item, so now let's continue moving on with our agenda. Let me see.
Vice Chair, I just wanted to note for the record that there are no hands raised for public comment on this item.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, Vice Chair Blair, can I make one comment too?
Of course.
Sorry,
yeah.
I just was but yeah, thanks. I appreciated having the conversation as well. I think, as what Vice Chair Blakespear, you said resonated a lot with me, and my mind was in a similar spot, which is I personally think it's kind of up to our job as directors on the board to provide feedback when something happens. And while I would have a difficulty supporting something that was a First Amendment, a control of a First Amendment privilege or right, I do think that participating in this type of activity is very problematic and creates more board division, and also obviously takes time. That's why we're talking about it now. And I did provide that feedback to Executive Director Hassan, and in a respectful, nice way, saying I don't think that was a good action to take, or these are good actions to take, and it's not helpful with respect to making coherence and progress on the board. And that's what I think our job of board members is to provide that feedback, and hopefully it's taken to heart, which I believe it will be, and we can move on. It's in some ways the ultimate remedy is the same either way, which is if you're an officer of a company and you start contributing to candidates and issues that are highly detrimental to your company, you're likely not to be an officer of the company very much longer. But there usually aren't going to be policies that are going to prevent you from doing that. It's just expected behavior and good self-interest. So I think this is a great way to express that most of us think this is a bad idea. We want the leaders of our organizations to be effective and apolitical to the best of their ability. And so I think that hopefully that message is getting across, and we can move on. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Yes, thank you for commenting. Okay, anybody else? All right, I see no other hands raised, so we'll go back to our agenda here. Let's see where we are. So we're taking no action on that item. And then we have a legislative status report from Hector. And also just to ask in advance, do we have any public comments on this item?
I see no hands raised for public comment.
Okay, thank you.
Good morning. I'm very pleased to be with you today. And I'm going to be quick in my report. I know you're first on time. Even in pandemic times, we have lots of things to report. As I mentioned it, in my last occasion, the new free trade agreement with North America, the USMCA, went into effect on July 1st. And Mexico is again the largest international trading partner of the United States, accounting for 14% of all the international trade of our country. But our borders are continuing operating under some restrictions, allowing only trade and essential crossings, students, and US citizens and residents returning to the United States. Basically, tourism and family trips have been the only ones restricted. As of July of this year, there are about half of the number of people and slightly more commercial trucks crossing northbound through our region as compared to July of last year. Port of entries are operating with lower levels of staff, and our essential workers, students and citizens are experiencing hours and hours of border wait times. Recently, reports say that it's up to 9 hours. But works in other fronts showed significant progress. State Route 11 and the future Otay Mesa border crossing are moving forward. Our partners from Caltrans District 11 report that construction on State Route 11 is ahead of time, and most likely by this time of next year, we will be preparing to celebrate its completion. Currently, our SANDAG and Caltrans team is submitting applications for additional funds, and I hope that we can bring you a positive report sometime soon. In the meantime, we are preparing site tours for some of you that have shown interest in visiting the construction site, and also for Caltrans directors talks, Omishakin, and also for Commissioner Hillary Norton, chair of the CTC, obviously following all the health and social distancing protocols. Also on the Mexican side, there is a significant progress. A few weeks ago, our executive director, Hassan Ikrata, had a Zoom conversation with Mexico's Customs General Administrator, Mr. Horacio Duarte, and both agreed to continue working to move this project to the next level. And just the day before yesterday, Mexico announced that the hiring of a professional firm to act as the project manager for this project south of the border for Mesa de Otay 2. And perhaps by next week, they will announce the firm that will be in charge of executing the right-of-way acquisition. And finally, let me just refer to a visit that was held last week. The US EPA Administrator, Andrew Wheeler, and the US Ambassador to Mexico, the Honorable Christopher Landau, visited San Diego to make important announcements. $300 million on behalf of the EPA is going toward two near-term projects for the Tijuana River. One is a diversion project to increase capacity of water treatment, and the other is to capture trash and sediments before they reach the ocean. And also Mexico has done part on this solution, fixing its Poniente collector that captures water before crossing the border. And I want to congratulate the mayors of the cities of San Diego, Chula Vista, of course, Coronado, and Imperial Beach, and the leaders from the county of San Diego for this huge accomplishment in the framework of the new USMCA. And with this, I conclude my short report. And I will be able, if you want to have, to answer questions if you have questions.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from board members? Okay.
Mayor, this is
Yep.
Georgina. I don't have any questions. I'm just excited to hear the advancements on the work at the border thing. I just want to acknowledge the work that the staff has been doing, and it's good to hear that we're moving forward. Thank you.
Yes, and thank you for organizing those tours. I do want to take a tour, but I'm going to just wait a little bit until we're farther out in this pandemic before doing tours. I know you have certain protocols in place, but I'm not comfortable yet doing that. So I do hope that you offer them, a year from now.
Anytime.
Yeah. Okay, no other comments, or I don't see any hands raised or people wanting to speak. So, and we don't have any public comments on this.
Mayor Blakespear, would you like a quick state and federal update?
Yes, we would.
Okay, I'll make this brief. So it was a very hectic end to the state legislative session. I'm sure everyone heard. Usually the legislature passes between 1,300 to 1,500 bills every year. This year was a little over 500. That said, the governor has until the end of this month, September 30th, to either sign or veto all of the bills that did make it to his desk. So we'll be back to this committee next month with a comprehensive review of everything that happened this year. I'll just give you a little preview. I would say there were three kind of themes that resonated this year as far as bills that were most relevant to SANDAG's purview, and those related to housing, CEQA streamlining, and shared mobility. On the housing front, the Senate did introduce a major housing package a few months ago. It was deliberated and was moving through the process, but ultimately did not beat the clock. And so those bills were not passed by the midnight deadline to make it to the governor. On the housing element front, we did want to update the committee per the board's direction. We did hold extensive conversations with the administration as well as key committee staff and legislative staff over the last few months to share some of the challenges that your local jurisdictions are facing in trying to do, that meaningful outreach to folks as you work on your housing element updates. I'll say that that the challenges were definitely acknowledged by all of the folks that we met, but they wanted to see how far we could get over the next few months. And so the governor's office did say they weren't ready to move forward on an extension at this time, but does want to stay in contact and continue the dialogue over the next few months. And again, offered any of the resources that they or the Department of Housing and Community Development can provide to help us overcome some of these challenges. And then we can revisit again in January if legislation is necessary to provide some more time relief. There is discussion of a potential special session to circle back on some of these housing or economic recovery issues, but right now the chances for that are looking very minimal. On CEQA streamlining, we were very pleased to see that our bill, AB 2731, authored by Assemblymember Todd Gloria and co-authored by Senate Pro Tem Tony Atkins, did pass out of the legislature unanimously at every step and is awaiting signature by the governor. In addition, SB 288 was a big CEQA streamlining bill that we were watching that provides additional CEQA exemptions for transit, bike, and pedestrian projects that moved forward. And on shared mobility, this was actually the opposite. There were a few bills that were concerning to many local jurisdictions, as well as our agency, in that they may have undermined certain efforts that we all are taking to advance shared mobility throughout the region. Those bills ultimately were not successful, but we do expect them to come back next year, so we'll be keeping an eye on those. I wanted to flag a couple of bills that may be of interest to some of our members. SB 1301 by Senator Wasto has to do with the Tijuana River Valley, as Hector was just talking about. So I wanted to flag it. This bill would require the California Environmental Protection Agency and Natural Resources Agency to create an action plan on the Tijuana River Valley watershed. So pending appropriation by the legislature, they would be required to create this action plan and update it every 3 years. And then I know a couple of our member jurisdictions were interested in SB 9. This bill ultimately did not pass out of the legislature. It had to do with AB 1486, which was a bill passed last year that has to do with surplus land requirements. And my understanding is AB 1486 essentially removed some pretty significant exemptions for cities, counties, and agencies like our transit agency, MTS, under the surplus land requirements. And so SB 9 was being run this year to provide some very limited exemptions to allow projects in our region to move forward. Unfortunately, this is another bill that did not beat the clock. So folks are reading now to figure out what next steps may be if they want to bring this back next year. Essentially, what the issue is the proponents of AB 1486 want to continue to advance affordable housing projects as quickly as possible, while perhaps not recognizing all of the various priorities that cities and counties may have for the land that they oversee. So there's going to definitely need to be a dialogue between those two parties to figure out a compromise going forward. And at the federal level, I'll just quickly say the federal fiscal year ends on September 30th, so we officially have 19 days until our transportation appropriations run out and our FAST Act authorization. So with that, the latest that we're hearing is that Congress likely will be passing a continuing resolution to keep appropriations going at least through December. It looks like they're looking at a 1-year just clean extension of the FAST Act transportation authorization. And latest, as you probably heard, COVID relief doesn't look like anything's happening anytime soon, likely certainly not before the elections. So that's the latest on state and federal legislation.
Okay, well, thank you very much. I think
Chair Blakespeare, I'd like to make a comment on 1486 and the fix for it that didn't make it out in time. It received a 64-0 vote in the Assembly, but however, when it got to the Senate side, they didn't take it up. But I think this is a bill that 1486 and the fix for it is something that SANDAG should watch very, very carefully, because what the bill does is that it requires that any surplus land that is owned by any type of an agency, which includes cities or special districts or MTS or North County or even excess property that SANDAG might have, that they first put out the first priority is for affordable housing developers to be able to bid and build on it. Then if that doesn't happen, then the jurisdiction can consider other agencies or other uses for it. So how it affects us specifically and most currently is the things that we're trying to do on MTS relative to putting mixed use and transit oriented uses on surplus property on the parking lots that land is owned by the MTS. So that would, like torpedo all our plans for that and require first that affordable housing be built there. And the argument that I was making against that kind of thing is that we're doing those transit-oriented developments to be inclusive of all types of uses so that people can live and work on those properties. And that would take that ability away from us and just have it strictly as housing, which means that people would have to commute to get to their jobs instead of being able to work locally in some cases. So I think we have to really keep an eye on that.
okay, thank you for that. Any other comments? Okay, well, we're just at 10 o'clock, so we're on time here. The next meeting, the next executive committee meeting is scheduled for Friday, October 9, 2020 at 9 a.m. So with that, we are adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Good job, Catherine.
Thank you.